And now, Aaron Blanchard presents Fight Camp, an optimal education.
Thank you for joining me for this podcast up presentation, the Fight Camp, an optimal education, with me, Aaron Blanchard, the podcast enhancer, the only podcast enhancer from my solo show, which is a beginner's guide to mixed martial arts and, of course, the biggest brand in mixed martial arts, the UFC. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about, now we're going to talk about the light heavyweight division of the UFC, one of the most exciting divisions that has ever been in the UFC, and one of my personal favourites. But first of all, I'm going to do all the standard stuff. I've got to thank everyone for listening to my show. Thank you for keeping it in iTunes new and noteworthy on the sport and hobby section. Really chuffed with it. I'd like to thank the podcast, of course, and anyone who's tweeted me or retweeted me or favorited or anything or passed the message on. Thank you for the listeners. I keep growing every week. It's great. I really love doing this show. I hope it gets across how much I love the UFC, how passionate I am about mixed martial arts and their brand, the UFC. So that's all the, the home stuff, all the bill-paying monarchy. Is that what they call it? Not sure what it is. I'm just rambling now. So let's go straight now into the light heavyweight division, the 205-pound division of the UFC. So it's probably worth noting that before UFC 31, it was actually called the middleweight division. And there was obviously a big restructuring. They changed the structure and landscape of the tiers in the UFC. Then the 205-pounders became the light heavyweight division. There have been so many big names that have entered in this division in the UFC. It's one of the most big name divisions that there's ever been. It's brilliant. It is my personal favourite division. So let's kick it off with the first champion that they had. The first champion was Frank Shamrock. He won a tournament in Japan in '97. He was the first one crowned in this division as a champion. Frank actually later went on to vacate the title because he claimed there was not enough competition in this division for him, so he actually retired. That leads to the next champion, which was probably at the time was one of the bigger rises to stardom and the biggest bit of business that the UFC did at this time, because Tito Ortiz, the Huntington Beach bad boy Tito Ortiz, became the champion. He put a lot of bums in seats, Tito. A lot of people say he was a champion for as long as he was because there wasn't a competition. But he still performed at the fights, and he was a champion and their poster boy for a bit, if you want to call it that. And during that time, it did start off the noticeable feud with Ken Shamrock, the Hall of Famer Ken Shamrock. Him and Tito had quite a few battles back and forth. They were great fights. They were quite one-sided at the time, but very highbrow, very high publicity fights at the time. So it brought a lot of attention to the UFC. And gentleman I mentioned on the last episode, in the heavyweight division episode, is the Hall of Famer Randy Couture. Now, he also competed in this division and won the title twice. So he's the only person, one of the only people, I think it's 3 people that have been multiple division champions in the UFC, multiple titles. Hence, he's a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest of all time, and he had some really, really good battles with a gentleman that I'm going to talk about quite a bit because he's probably my favourite fighter. He's the man that made me such a big fan of UFC, and that is the Iceman Chuck Liddell. Now, Chuck Liddell he transcended the sport. He made it massive. He big mohawk, tattoo on his head, just come out swinging these big punches. He was just a great fighter, really entertaining, had some amazing battles. Randy Couture and him went back and forth a few times. He had a really, really legendary feud with Tito Ortiz. A lot of people seem to not like Tito Ortiz for some reason. So that was a great, great feud. I love the Tito Ortiz Chuck Liddell fights. If you get a chance to watch anything on YouTube or the internet or Fight Pass, please watch the Tito versus Chuck fights. They didn't get along. They didn't like each other. They were the two top guys in the division, the two most famous people at the time. It was great fights. I loved them. One of my favourite fights ever is the Chuck versus Tito. But no, Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell, they had some really memorable fights back and forth for titles as well. So the sport was really growing at this time, and it's probably to do, in my opinion, was to do with Chuck Liddell, because he got a lot of mainstream fans, a lot of celebrity fans because of Chuck Liddell as well. And if any sport's got celebrity fans, obviously brings a lot more notability to the sport, which it did. And it was just great for the sport at the time. A really good era in UFC. So after Chuck Liddell, the Iceman Chuck Liddell had his 4 title reigns, defences, and defended his title 4 times. He then lost the belt to a guy who's from another brand, another company called Pride. Now, I'm going to do a whole episode on Pride, and it's probably going to be quite a long episode, but I'm not going to talk about it as much now. But Pride were a promotion from Japan, and their champion, one of their big names, Quinton Rampage Jackson, he beat Chuck Liddell for the title. It was a big thing. Now, Quinton's been quite famous. He's gone on to play Mr. T in the new A-Team film that was made a few years ago. He appeared in TNA Wrestling for a time. So he's been around quite a bit on television, quite a high-profile kind of guy. He's been back and forth to the UFC a few times as well. Been in the press recently because he signed back for the UFC, even though he's under contract with another promotion. So they said he couldn't fight, then they said he could. It was a big back and forth, but he's now back in the UFC, which is great. And back in 2007, he actually had a unification fight with the Pride middleweight champion at the time, which was Dan Henderson. Hendo, really great fighter, and they unified it in UFC 75 in 2007. Great fight. Quinton won that fight. Brilliant. So that was put him in there as a big champion. Quinton's a really entertaining bloke, actually. He was one of the coaches on one of the Tough Enoughs. Ultimate Fighter. He was one of the coaches there. That was brilliant. He was against Rashad Evans, which is a great feud. They don't get along. Really entertaining stuff. Anyway, I digress. So there was also a little run of titles, one title reign, with a man called Forrest Griffin. Now, I've mentioned Forrest before. Forrest was one of the most important men in UFC. His fight with Stephen Bonner in the Ultimate Fighter Season 1 finale was still, I can watch the fight all the time. One of the greatest fights ever. The most important fight ever in the UFC. So he went from winning the Ultimate Fighter, which is brilliant enough, then actually becoming the world heavyweight champion in his division, which was excellent. It's just incredible. The first one to do it, brilliant. So yeah, that's always worth watching. It's a very emotional fight when he wins. Sadly though, he later went on to lose the title to Rashad Evans, Sugar Rashad Evans, who was a great fighter. All his fights were quite entertaining. He's a very grounded wrestler. He actually knocked Chuck Liddell out in a horrific fashion. A very famous knockout. Worth a watch. Very gutted about it. Obviously, I'm a Chuck Liddell fan. But great. Rashad Evans is a great fighter. He later lost his title to Lyoto Machida. Now, this is when the division started changing. The Dragon Lyoto Machida came along with this karate style that no one's seen before. Phenomenal fighter. Definite Hall of Famer one day. Changed the landscape of the UFC. Had some memorable fights with Mauricio Shogun Rua, who they later went on to exchange the title back and forth a couple of times, and there's a big rematch and 3 fights with them. Great fights. Shogun also absolute legend. Both Brazilian legends, these two gentlemen. So it's Lyoto Machida and Mauricio Shogun Rua, absolute legends. Great fights. Any of their fights are worth watching. Speaking of Mauricio Shogun Rua, if you ever watched the Shogun fight with Dan Henderson, possibly, arguably one of the greatest fights in UFC, an absolute 3-round war. It might even have been a 5-round war. It might have been the main event. It's unbelievable. They fought each other a few times back in Pride as well. Just a great fight. Another recommended fight to watch. So now I'm going to talk about the most important reign in the UFC light heavyweight division. the most controversial reign as well now in division, because of the guy who became the pound for pound best fighter in the world. His name is John Bones Jones. So it's Johnny Jones. You've probably heard of him quite a bit, because he was like the man in the sport, the poster boy, the big deal, the most title defences in the light heavyweight division, with I think it was eight title defences in the heavyweight division, which is tremendous. What a fighter! I mean, he was the youngest champion at the time he won it. He stepped into a title fight against Mauricio Shogun Rua with a few weeks' notice, because Rashad Evans was actually scheduled for the fight but was injured. He wanted to up the competition. He wanted to go up a level. Joe Rogan actually told him after a fight he had that he was going to be the number one contender for the title. He went on to beat Shogun in an amazing fashion to become the youngest UFC heavyweight champion they've ever had. And then later went on to dominate the sport completely for 4 years. Literally, the title defence after title defence, 8 title defences, and the list of people he has fought is incredible. So he defended his title against Quinton Rampage Jackson, against Lyoto the Dragon Machida, against then Sugar Rashad Evans, who was a former training partner of him. There was a massive bit of bad blood between them two. Great feud, great fight. Against Vitor Belfort, the phenom Vitor Belfort, who legendary fighter, but got destroyed that night as well. He fought Chael Sonnen, one of the best talkers ever in UFC. He beat him. He then went on to possibly one of the greatest fights of all time, arguably one of the greatest fights of all time, against the Mauler Alexander Gustafsson. What a fight. I can watch the fight back and think that Gustafsson won. Some people think Jones won. It's one of those fights. There's never been a rematch. It should have been a rematch. What a great, great fight. I recommend you watch that one. It's unbelievable. Both gentlemen. It was like a Rocky film. I've never seen anything like it. It was brilliant. But he beat him. He then beat Glover Teixeira, who was a man who was on a 20-fight win streak of knocking people out. John Jones destroyed him. Then he went on to fight quite a famous feud, public feud with DC Daniel Cormier. They had a proper fight at one of the press conferences. They both got fined, nearly got suspended. Huge, but John Jones, what a fighter. He has made some mistakes. He's obviously not in the UFC right now, and it had his title stripped from him because he was naughty outside the UFC. He broke a couple of laws, and he's waiting to find out if he's going to go to prison of some sort for, I believe it's a DUI or a hit and run. I think it's a hit and run. So he's made some mistakes, but no doubt in the octagon, one of the greatest fighters there's ever been, one of the greatest champions. He will one day give it back, and he will one day get his title shot back. Because later on, because of his title being stripped from him, the UFC made UFC 187, a title fight between Daniel Cormier and Anthony Rumble Johnson, who was the number one contender. They had fight. Daniel Cormier won, though he is, after losing to Jones, he then became the champion anyway, because of the discrepancy that Jones had and had stripped from the belt. But John Jones, watch his fights. The man is incredible. Such an athlete. He can do it all. Actually, he was one of the first people I saw get disqualified for an illegal elbow, a 12-6 elbow. Very dangerous, but he actually got disqualified. So the only blemish on his record is an actual disqualification. Yeah, so I can't really comment on the outside of the octagon stuff that's happening to John Jones. I don't really know too much details. But in the octagon, what I do know is the man is a machine. It is a pound for pound greatest fighter. Not currently, because he's not in the UFC, but probably on the planet he's the pound for pound greatest fighter. I believe so. It's between him and Demetrius Johnson, Mighty Mouse. But that's the big man and a very little man, so you can't really compare the two of them at the moment. But any of his fights you can watch. The man, he did things that you wouldn't believe for such a man. And he came into UFC and he had a couple of years of experience behind him. He's just quite new to the sport, young, hungry, and just very, very gifted. So I hope you can tell that by the way I've been talking and that I love the light heavyweight division. It's my favourite division to watch because some of my